The iron gates groaned open like a dying beast, revealing the imposing silhouette of the Oakhaven Psychiatric Hospital against the bruised twilight sky. Anna, a young architect with a determined set to her jaw, adjusted her hard hat and stepped out of the dusty jeep. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and something else, something indefinable, like a lingering scent of antiseptic mixed with decay. Oakhaven wasn't just old, it felt ancient, a relic of a time when mental illness was shrouded in fear and misunderstanding. She surveyed the building. Its Gothic architecture, once grand, now stood in stark contrast to the overgrown weeds choking the grounds. Broken windows stared out like vacant eyes, and ivy climbed the crumbling stone walls like grasping skeletal fingers. This was her project, to breathe new life into this decaying behemoth, transforming it into a modern community center. But as she gazed upon it, a shiver ran down her spine, a premonition that this restoration would be more than just bricks and mortar. The rest of her team, a motley crew of builders, electricians, and surveyors, began unloading equipment from the other vehicles. There was a nervous energy among them, a shared unease at the desolate location. As Dana walked towards the main entrance, a heavy oak door studded with iron, she noticed a flicker of movement in one of the upper windows. It was gone in an instant, barely a shadow, but it was enough to quicken her pulse. She dismissed it as a trick of the light, yet the feeling of being watched lingered. The heavy door creaked open with a mournful sigh as she pushed it, revealing a cavernous entrance hall swallowed by shadows. The restoration of Oakhaven had begun, but something told Anna they were not alone. The air inside was frigid, a stark contrast to the late summer evening outside. Dust motes danced in the faint light, filtering through the grimy windows, illuminating peeling paint and crumbling plaster. Anna ran a gloved hand along a cold stone wall, feeling the weight of history pressing down on her. She had spent weeks researching Oakhaven's past, delving into dusty archives and old newspaper articles. The stories she uncovered were disturbing, tales of experimental treatments, lobotomies performed with crude instruments, and patients left to languish in deplorable conditions. The hospital had opened in the late 19th century, a beacon of hope for those suffering from mental afflictions. But over time, it had devolved into something far more sinister. Reports of overcrowding, neglect, and abuse had surfaced throughout the 20th century, culminating in its closure in the 1970s. The records she found detailed the use of electroshock therapy without proper anesthesia, ice baths that lasted for hours, and the chilling practice of prefrontal lobotomies, often performed with little regard for the patient's well-being. In a small, forgotten office, they discovered a collection of old medical records and photographs. The faces in the photos stared back at them, gaunt and hollow-eyed, filled with a profound sadness. Some were restrained in straitjackets, others sat listlessly in darkened rooms. One photo in particular caught Anna's attention. A man with kind eyes and a gentle smile, his expression a stark contrast to the suffering etched on the faces of the other patients. His name was Elias Thorne. As the team explored further, they found remnants of the treatments, rusted restraints, a decaying electroshock machine, and a chillingly small room with padded walls. The isolation chamber. A palpable sense of dread settled over the group. The whispers they had heard upon arrival seemed to grow louder, weaving through the decaying structure like mournful sighs. The past of Oakhaven was not just history, it felt present, a tangible weight pressing down on them. The following days were marked by a growing unease. The subtle occurrences of their first day had escalated into more disturbing phenomena. Tools went missing, only to reappear in different locations. Lights flickered erratically, casting long, dancing shadows that seemed to writhe and shift in the periphery of their vision. The air grew colder, especially in the older sections of the building, and the whispers became more distinct, sometimes sounding like hushed conversations just beyond earshot. One afternoon, while Anna was reviewing blueprints in the main hall, a stack of files on a nearby table suddenly flew to the floor. There was no draft. No one had touched them. She felt a chill, despite the warm afternoon sun streaming through a broken window. She picked up the scattered papers, her hands trembling slightly. It was then that she noticed a faint, almost imperceptible scent, a cloying sweetness like decaying flowers. The most unsettling incident involved Carlos, one of the younger builders. He was working alone in the basement, clearing debris from what appeared to have been a storage room. Later that evening, he approached Anna, his face pale and his eyes wide with fear. He recounted how he had been working when he heard someone call his name. He turned, but no one was there. Then he heard it again, closer this time, a low whisper right behind him. He spun around but still saw nothing. The voice repeated his name a third time, and this time he felt a cold breath on the back of his neck. He fled the basement, refusing to go back down there alone. The team's initial skepticism had begun to erode, replaced by a growing sense of dread. They started to avoid working alone, sticking together in small groups. Inna, ever the pragmatist, tried to find logical explanations for the events, attributing them to drafts, faulty wiring, and overactive imaginations. But even she couldn't deny the growing weight of the inexplicable. The whispers in the darkness were becoming more insistent, more personal, and the feeling that they were not alone in Oakhaven had become undeniable. The sweet, decaying floral scent now permeated the air in certain sections of the building, a constant reminder of something unseen, something malevolent. A sense of foreboding hung heavy in the air as Anna and her team ventured deeper into the hospital's labyrinthine corridors. They had discovered a wing of the building that was not marked on any of the blueprints, a section seemingly forgotten by time. The hallway was narrow and dimly lit, the air thick with dust and a chilling stillness. At the end of this forgotten corridor, a single door stood out, its paint peeling and a tarnished brass number plate affixed to it, 13. A heavy padlock secured the door, but a few swift blows from a crowbar quickly dislodged it. The door creaked open, revealing a small, square room. The air inside was noticeably colder, and the sweet, decaying floral scent was overpowering. The walls were bare, except for a series of deep scratches that marred the plaster, as if someone had desperately tried to claw their way out. A single, rusted metal bed frame stood in the center of the room, its mattress long gone, leaving only the bare springs exposed. As Anna stepped into the room, a wave of dizziness washed over her. Images flashed through her mind. A man strapped to the bed, his eyes wide with terror, a figure in a white coat looming over him, holding a gleaming surgical instrument. The vision was so vivid, so visceral, that she stumbled back, gasping for air. She felt a cold hand brush against her cheek, and a whisper barely audible echoed in her ears. "Please, help me." She shared her experience with the team, and they decided to investigate further. They found old maintenance logs that referred to Room 13 as a secure isolation chamber, a place where patients deemed uncontrollable were confined. The logs described brutal methods of restraint and prolonged periods of isolation. They also found a faded photograph tucked away in one of the logbooks. It was the same man Anna had seen in the earlier photograph, Elias Thorne. A note scribbled on the back read, "Patient 13, severe melancholia, subjected to experimental treatments." The pieces were beginning to fall into place. Elias Thorne had been a patient in this very room, subjected to unimaginable horrors. The scratches on the walls, the chilling atmosphere, the whispers, it all pointed to his tormented spirit still trapped within these walls. The vision Anna experienced, the cold touch, the plea for help, it was Elias reaching out, desperate for release. The room felt charged with his pain, his fear, his lingering presence. The sweet, decaying floral scent, they realized, was not just a scent. It was the lingering essence of his suffering, a constant reminder of the horrors he endured within Room 13. The discovery of Room 13 marked a turning point. The subtle disturbances escalated into terrifying manifestations. Doors slammed shut with violent force, disembodied footsteps echoed through the corridors, and shadowy figures darted across their peripheral vision. The temperature fluctuated wildly, plunging from warm to frigid in an instant. The sweet, decaying floral scent now permeated the entire wing, a constant, sickening reminder of Elias's presence. One evening, as the team was packing up for the day, a series of loud bangs echoed from the basement. Carlos, still visibly shaken from his previous experience, refused to go down there. Ana, armed with a flashlight and a growing sense of dread, cautiously descended the creaking stairs. The air in the basement was thick and cold, and the scent of decay was almost unbearable. As she moved deeper into the darkness, she heard a faint whimpering sound. She followed the sound to a small, windowless room, the same storage room Carlos had been working in. The whimpering grew louder. Ana shone her flashlight into the room, and her blood ran cold. Carlos was huddled in a corner, his eyes wide with terror, staring at something she couldn't see. He was muttering incoherently, repeating the same phrase over and over. "He's here, he's right behind me." Suddenly, the temperature in the room plummeted. Ana felt a cold gust of air brush past her, and the scent of decaying flowers intensified. A dark shape materialized behind Carlos, a fleeting silhouette that seemed to writhe and contort in the shadows. Carlos screamed, scrambling back against the wall, his eyes fixed on the apparition. Ana rushed to his side, pulling him to his feet. As she did, she felt a cold hand grasp her arm, its grip surprisingly strong. She turned to see a figure standing before her, a translucent form shrouded in shadows. It was Elias. His face was contorted in a mask of pain and rage, his eyes burning with an otherworldly intensity. He opened his mouth, and a low, guttural moan escaped his lips, a sound filled with centuries of suffering. The scene shifted around Ana. She was no longer in the basement. She was in Room 13, witnessing Elias being subjected to a brutal medical procedure. She saw the fear in his eyes, the tears streaming down his face, the desperate pleas for mercy. The vision was overwhelming, a torrent of pain and anguish that washed over her. Then just as suddenly, the vision ended. She was back in the basement. Carlos was still trembling beside her, and the shadowy figure of Elias had vanished. But the chilling presence remained, a palpable sense of dread that hung heavy in the air. They managed to get Carlos out of the basement and back to the main building, but he was in a state of shock, barely able to speak. The confrontation had been brief, but its impact was profound. They had come face to face with the tormented spirit of Elias Thorne, and the encounter had left them shaken to their core. The events in the basement had left the team deeply shaken. Carlos was in no condition to continue working and was sent home to recover. The remaining members were hesitant to return to the hospital, but the project deadline loomed, and Ana knew they couldn't afford to stop. She spent the next day researching Elias Thorne, delving deeper into his history. She discovered that he had been admitted to Oakhaven after suffering a severe personal tragedy, the loss of his wife and child in a fire. The record suggested that his melancholia was, in fact, profound grief, exacerbated by the brutal treatments he endured at the hospital. In a dusty box of personal effects, Ana found a small, leather-bound diary. It belonged to Elias. His entries, written in a delicate script, revealed a sensitive and intelligent man, a loving husband and father. The final entry, written just days before his death, spoke of his longing to be reunited with his family, to be buried beside them in the old church cemetery just outside of town. A realization dawned on Ana. Elias wasn't seeking vengeance. He was seeking peace. His tormented spirit was trapped, bound to the place where he had suffered so much. He wasn't trying to harm them. He was trying to communicate, to ask for help. Anna shared her findings with the team. They were initially skeptical, but the diary entries and the details of Elias's life resonated with them. They decided to honor his final wish. They contacted the local church and obtained permission to bury a small urn containing some earth from room 13, symbolizing Elias's spirit next to his family's graves. That evening, Anna and the remaining team members returned to Oakhaven. They went to room 13, the air still heavy with the lingering scent of decay. Anna read aloud from Elias's diary, her voice echoing through the silent room. She spoke of his love for his family, his grief, and his longing for peace. She then explained their intention to fulfill his final wish. As she finished speaking, a gentle breeze swept through the room, extinguishing the candles they had lit. The temperature rose slightly, and the oppressive atmosphere began to dissipate. The sweet, decaying floral scent faded, replaced by a faint fragrance of fresh earth and wildflowers. They then proceeded to the church cemetery. Under the pale light of the moon, they buried the urn near the weathered headstones of Elias's family. As they finished, Anna looked back towards Oakhaven, its silhouette now softened by the distance and the darkness. A faint light flickered in the window of room 13, then vanished. A sense of peace settled over her, a feeling that Elias had finally found his rest. The horrors of Oakhaven had not been erased, but a small measure of healing had taken place. The restoration of the building could now continue, not just as a physical transformation, but as a tribute to the memory of those who had suffered within its walls.